Well, great. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Abubata Dasa and I manage EdTech Hub country engagement activities. We are so excited to share the work we have been doing with our three amazing small grants partners over the last few months: Rising Academies, Learning Equality, and eKitabu. But before we start, a few quick words about the EdTech Hub for those who may not know us. And I will advance my slides. So the EdTech Hub is a global nonprofit research partnership. Our goal is to empower people by giving them the tools, the resources, the evidence that they need to make informed decisions about technology and education. We are here because, as we know, technology has the potential to enhance learning, but this potential isn't being realized for the kinds of reasons we've listed on this next slide here. We don't have quality evidence about what is most and least effective. Relevant issues are often under-researched. Where evidence exists, it's hard to find, and it's not in formats that are easy to understand and translate to a policy or program decision. And there isn't enough learning and partnership building to accelerate the use of this evidence. So it's with these challenges in mind that we are committed to addressing, that we have engaged with the three partners who will be presenting today. So now turning to our work with them. With COVID-19 surge funding, we designed a small grants program to learn alongside partners responding to school closures and learning disruptions caused by COVID-19. These are relatively small and catalytic investments that we made because of their potential to achieve big results, and we hope they'll be an entry point for future partnerships. We selected partners working in or across EdTech Hub's 6 priority countries: Bangladesh and Pakistan in Asia, and Kenya, Ghana, Sierra Leone, and Tanzania in Africa. We also selected partners committed to inclusive education and serving marginalized learner populations. Next, I'll hand over to Hub colleagues who have been working closely with the amazing partners we will hear from today. But before that, I've been asked to cover a few housekeeping details. So first, we will be recording this session, so it will be available to those who are not with us today to watch at their own timing. Second, everyone will be muted during the presentations. And next, the chat function will be open throughout, so please use it to engage with fellow attendees, to ask questions, to drop your comments. And the way we'll sort of run the program for today is each of our 3 featured partners will give a brief presentation sharing highlights from their work. And then we'll have a Q&A, sort of a combined consolidated Q&A at the end of the 3 presentations. You can raise your hand to ask a question at that point, or feel free to drop it in the chat box. So now I'll hand it over to Rising Academies to kick us off with their presentation.
Thank you, Abeba. That's great. Will Chris be providing an intro? I know he was planning to.
Yes, is Chris here?
No problem if not. I'm quite happy to jump straight in.
I'm happy to do the introduction. I think Chris might be having technical difficulties in Sierra Leone. But anyway, yes, I'm ready. Oh, okay. Are you there, Chris? Please go ahead.
Perfect. Yes. Sorry if having some audio difficulties. Thank you, Ababa, and welcome everyone. So my name is Chris McBurney, and I'm really pleased to be able to introduce today's first organization, Rising Academies. At the start of the pandemic, Rising took up the challenge of using a low-tech approach to keep the most marginalized children learning during school closures. And within 2 weeks of schools closing in Sierra Leone and Liberia, Rising had written, recorded, and aired the first educational radio broadcast. And since then, the team has adapted their curriculum to create the Rising on Air initiative, which is a 20-week program of radio scripts and SMS content made freely available to organizations across the world. And as part of our small grants initiative, we partnered with Rising to support the expansion of this platform, to set up a community of practice and to develop a practical how-to guide on implementing and evaluating radio education programs. And that's just gone up on our Twitter today, so please check it out. And now I'm really delighted to welcome George, who will tell you more about Rising's work under our grant initiative and how the team plans to sustain their impact into the future. And a special shout out to Bryony, who's jumped in at the last minute to help us navigate some real connectivity issues. Over to you, George.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone at EdTech Hub. It's been amazing working with you, and I really appreciate this opportunity. It's apt that I'm talking about non-internet solutions, and my internet connection in Ghana is extremely tricky today. So I apologize for if it's not too seamless how I move through this presentation, but Bryony, thank you for your help. So I was in my office in Monrovia, Liberia, when the first case of coronavirus was confirmed. The 87 schools I was running on behalf of the Liberian government closed their doors just 2 days later. But we had one thing going for us at Rising, and that was that this wasn't our first global health crisis. We were founded just before the Ebola crisis in Sierra Leone. And during that time, we learned a huge amount about distance learning and how to kind of support children through those periods. And we felt there were two sort of major areas where we felt that we could make a difference this time. The first was the speed of delivery. During Ebola, radio programs took a long time to be developed. And also we felt that we could help around quality and engagement of the actual content itself. So very quickly after the coronavirus case was confirmed, we moved to producing radio content. If you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide, Bryony. And we started creating, reorganizing our curriculum so that we could deliver high quality content. And we got lots and lots of interest from people all over the world about how we were doing it, what our approach was. And we realized we were really onto something that could be shared out and could help a lot more people in different parts of the world. So if you wouldn't mind going on to slide 4, we developed the concept of Rising on Air very organically. It was really an accident that became something really exciting. Our initial content, the solution itself, was 20 weeks of high quality, ready to air scripts and audio that eventually was developed into English, French, and Arabic across 5 different grade levels. And we also extended to teacher professional development as we realized that was a strong interest from that. And we made it all open source, available for free in a customizable content approach available via Creative Commons. And we started initially small, but through the help of different networks that we knew, like Global Schools Forum, through EdTech Hub, through other funders, we were able to start sharing what we were producing with people in different parts of the world. And so really a lot of it was word of mouth, a lot of it was people we already knew. But pretty quickly, we scaled up fast. And that meant that the kind of last mile delivery of Rising on Air was done by different partners in different parts of the world. So we were delivering the content directly in Sierra Leone and Liberia, where we normally operate, but other partners were delivering content in different parts of the globe. On the next slide, slide 5, we were able to reach in under 200 days and for less than $500,000, a program that we think reached upwards of 12 million children. The content was used in 26 countries by over 30 partners. It was adapted into 9 additional languages in addition to English, Arabic, and French, and through 8 different delivery channels. So in addition to radio, SMS, WhatsApp, and IVR, and 5 government partnerships were part of that. As a cost metric, in terms of our original investment, the project cost around 5 cents per child reached. On slide 6, we've seen some very encouraging results, and we've learned a huge amount, which I'll come to later. But it's been a huge challenge for us to understand the efficacy of this. I mean, one of the things that's really hard is getting a program up and running and to reach lots of children, and managing to evaluate and assess the program at the same time in the middle of a pandemic has been really tough. But we've done what we can, and it's something that we're committed to kind of improving on as much as possible. So we've done a lot of surveys with students and parents. We've found very high satisfaction rates of over 90% in terms of parents wanting to continue the content coming through via radio and SMS. We know that surveys of students has found that over 50% of students in our sample were listening to the radio for an hour a day, 3.5 days a week. We've been speaking to collaborating partners, and again, over 90% of our collaborating partners have expressed an interest to want to continue and extend the partnerships we created during this crisis. And we did some very interesting learning assessments of over 1,000 students in Sierra Leone, which showed that despite kind of global learning losses taking place, we did see learning gains in both literacy and numeracy, and also saw rates of illiteracy and innumeracy drop as well, which is extremely encouraging. But there were limitations to what we could really find out during that period, and so we're committed to kind of find out more. We have a nimble RCT in place with the Centre for Global Development, which is helping us to establish even more facts about the efficacy of the project, and in particular some of the supplementary things we built into our program. And we've also got some new studies coming along the line with EdTech Hub and Results for Development that will be based in Sierra Leone, Ghana, but there's also a project happening in Bangladesh, and a learning assessment also taking place in Pakistan, which we're really excited about. Thinking ahead of what we can do on slide 7, we're focused on trying to turn Rising on Air into an enduring asset that can be used by many more organizations and reach many more children. The first priority is to continue to strengthen the evidence base, as I just mentioned, but we're also looking to build a replication toolkit that makes the adoption and implementation of the content we have as frictionless as possible. This would include multilingual, multi-platform content, support resources, and very importantly, monitoring and evaluation tools so that we can improve the way in which we assess the impact. And finally, we're looking to build out our kind of super users, as we call them, governments and large institutional partners that can really take what we've created and reach many more millions of children. In addition to that, on slide 8, we're developing something called Rory, or Rising on Air Interactive. This is going to be a chatbot tutor powered by AI and delivered via SMS and WhatsApp that will draw on both our audio content and our text content from our Rising on Air scripts. So think of it like a Spotify playlist for learning. This is a tool which we're really excited about, because we don't think there's technology chatbot technology which draws on both text and audio, but also it helps to navigate some of the big challenges of delivering via radio, making learning more personalized, making sure that there's no barriers to entry around the time of day in which content is available. So we still see radio as being extremely important to kind of future efforts, but we also want to take what we've built and build it out in new ways. And Rory is a really exciting next project we're going to be building with a company called Filament AI. What have we learned during this time? Well, on slide 9, I think first thing is coronavirus taught us that the content we have can help children in ways and in places that we never imagined. The content created in Liberia and Sierra Leone has been used in the Himalayas and Pakistan and East Africa and lots of different parts of the world. So we've learned a huge amount. I think 2 big things stand out to me. One is that the speed of adaptation and implementation was critical to the success. The fact that we were able to move fast was really important for a lot of organizations around the world, and that was extremely important for us. The second thing is that what Rising on Air is able to offer people is a breadth of content. So we cover 5 age ranges across literacy and numeracy and teacher professional development. So there's a lot of content for people to pick from, but there's maximal flexibility about how people use that. So what we've seen from our different partners is they will take certain elements of what we want to do and they'll completely readjust it for however suits their environment. And for us, that is exactly the right way it should be happening, that partners have that flexibility in the last mile to use their competitive advantage to create something that's great. And finally, it's really helped to bring down the cost for a lot of people. Producing high quality radio, there's a production cost and a distribution cost. And by making this content available to people around the world, we've significantly reduced the production cost around broadcasting, which has helped people to kind of get things out quickly and to make sure that the quality is high. I will finish by just mentioning that on slide 10, that solving the global learning crisis has never been more important. The new normal is the old normal for many millions of children around the world, and we have many children that will be going back to school, but many who will remain out of school. Recent studies have shown that early studies are showing that there's been a 25% drop in children meeting basic levels of literacy and numeracy since COVID began, and a 3% drop in access. So this has never been more important. So I think my final line is just to say, the crisis may be abating, but the need for this technology is as strong as it's ever been.
Thank you so much, George. So yes, I think there's a lot to learn from your presentation, and I'm actually quite excited to learn more about Rory. I think that's going to be quite an interesting AI initiative that is focused on low and middle income context. So next up, we have learning equality. And as Abeba may have mentioned earlier, we chose grantees that are especially dedicated to ensuring that every child in the world has access to quality education. And Learning Equality is one such organization, and they have done this through supporting the creation, adoption, and distribution of open educational resources, as well as creating supportive tools for innovative pedagogy. So Learning Equality's open source educational platform called Colibri is designed to provide offline access to curatable, openly licensed educational content that targets users in low resource and low connectivity settings. For example, this could be rural schools or refugee camps. And through our partnership with them, we have really learned and built a better understanding of how to develop learning products and tools in contexts where there is limited access to the internet. So I'll hand over to Lauren and Shivi now to tell us more about what they did in their grant and what they've learned. Over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Taskeen. It's been so incredible to work with you and the team over the last couple of months with the EdTech Hub. Just to quickly introduce ourselves, my name is Lauren, and my colleague Shivi and I are incredibly excited to be here today to share more about Learning Equality's accomplishments and takeaways from our collaboration with the EdTech Hub. As Taskeen mentioned, our shared effort developing different aspects of the Colibri ecosystem of products was the core focus of this collaboration. Colibri is Learning Equality's adaptable set of open solutions specially designed for offline first teaching and learning. It's presently used in more than 200 countries and territories around the world in this adaptable model that Taskeen has outlined. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we were talking quite a bit to the EdTech Hub about the greatest areas of needs to support continuity of learning and where learning equality could be most impactful. And we determined these three areas that's on the slide in front of you, where we thought that we could have the greatest impact while looking across our core product ecosystem. So I'll turn it over to Shivi to share some of our accomplishments, and then we'll conclude with some key takeaways.
Thanks, Lauren. And hello, everybody. So the first big project that we focused on for the purposes of our grant was in building out our digital library, one of the core functions of Colibri, to include French learning resources. And my colleague Vahid, who is actually on this call, was the one to spearhead this work from our end. So if you have any questions about that, we'd definitely welcome you to ask them in the chat so that he can answer. We scoped over 50 resources for the French content library, and we ended up integrating 3, which were based on French language education, civic and social education, and math instruction as well. You can check them out by looking at the gray box on the slides if you're interested in seeing them. From there, the next thing we did on the next slide, as you can see, is focused on building the capacity of the stakeholders who use our digital library to actually adapt the different materials that we have for their own contexts, a process that we refer to a lot as curriculum alignment. We developed a set of self-paced training materials and tested them out in a couple of our different key partnerships and collaborations, available in English, French, and Arabic to enable people to more actively engage with this process. And then finally, the next step in the curriculum preparation phase of our grant was translating the user interface of the tool that we use in order to actually do this alignment into French and Arabic. Once we were done with those 3 projects, as you can see on the next slide, we wanted to increase dialogue in our general space about the process of curriculum alignment. So we created this concept note in collaboration with the EdTech Hub, whose aim is to centralize the work of curriculum alignment across the space so that a lot of our different stakeholders don't repeat alignment efforts, don't keep them in silos, but are able to talk about them, to share them, to standardize them, and to build on each other's work in that way. So our aim is really to increase dialogue about a step in the process, which a lot of people engage in, but which can be a little bit under-acknowledged in EdTech solutions.
Great. And the last aspect of our collaboration was what we termed mutual support. It was really just helping to learn from the EdTech Hub to put into our product ecosystem, but also to share our learnings on Calibri as a virtual learning environment, how we engage with government, and help to feed into some of the really fantastic research that the EdTech Hub has been producing. So now that you have a sense of what we've accomplished, we're really now interested in diving a bit more deeply into what some of our key takeaways are, what worked, what didn't, where are lessons learned that we can apply to the rest of our collaboration, to the rest of our work.
The first big lesson and takeaway that we wanted to talk about is this big question and need that we were left with after doing our French scoping, which is how should learning platforms which are designed for the constraints and trends of one language environment adapt to the needs of the other? And a big takeaway from that was that we as OER advocates need to be able to account for different and occasionally conflicting trends in the OER space by language. Here are some of the ones that we noticed in French and English, for instance. There's a great difference in the types of subjects that these two OER creators tend to focus on. There's a big difference between where the OER are found, where that you can find them, and who owns the material and who creates it, and therefore who we might want to have partnerships with and who we might want to explore further as contributors to these digital libraries. In French, we saw a lot more individuals creating, owning, and owning material, whereas in English, the trend in OER is often for organizations to do it. And this has a lot of ramifications for people who are localizing materials and people who are sharing them in general in the OER space. So we saw a really great need to inquire about and document these differences between the two settings. The second big takeaway is about this nature of this concept called alignment. And as we mentioned, our goal was really to make visible this key step, which can really make or break so many different digital education initiatives. A lot of our outputs were about explaining the importance of alignment. However, through our collaborations and the introductions that EdTech Hub made to a lot of ministries in particular, we found that a lot of different people are engaging in processes of alignment and describing it as different things. So you can see processes of vetting where materials are accepted or rejected, of matching where they're matched to different curriculum standards, and of leveling where it's decided whether they're teaching at the correct level. So these processes are presently spread out in a lot of different places across the curriculum development lifecycle. And in the future, we'd like to explore ways to meet stakeholders where they are, in which of these processes are most important to them. And we've seen a real uptick of requests for capacity building help on these types of processes during COVID-19 in particular.
Great, thanks, Shivi. The third takeaway that I've touched upon a little bit already is just the usefulness of having the EdTech Hub as a thought partner in this collaboration. Not only were we able to leverage their expertise and think critically about different aspects of our work, but some of those learnings have already directly impacted our core product development and thinking about how we should add on to elements of our Calibri EdTech toolkit, but also how we talk about Calibri and how we think about working with government and the types of services that we could offer as an organization that would be most impactful. And the fourth area is just from a funder perspective, having the ability to receive funds that go into open source projects is really critical when you're aiming to foster an ecosystem of public goods, particularly during COVID, during an uncertain times where everyone's priorities were shifting in different ways. Knowing that there was resources to feed into our core product development was incredibly useful, and also really helped to then create public goods that could then support government and NGOs. We've touched upon the fact already that we've had resources allocated specifically for internationalization and alignment, and that really helps to ensure that the usability of our products have a more global relevance, so incredibly valuable. So just to conclude, we're really excited still with what's to come and the continuing relationship with EdTech Hub. Our work on finding French resources still continues, and we love to learn if there's any others that you know about that we can feed into our mapping. We'll be hosting a webinar on February 17th on curriculum alignment with UNHCR and with EdTech Hub joining. And so we're really excited to dive in deeper to some of what Shivi had shared and continue this dialogue around the curriculum alignment hub. And lastly, we aim to continue to support EdTech Hub on describing Calibri as a virtual learning environment and seeing other areas where we can learn from each other. So thank you so much again for this opportunity, and really great to work with you all.
Great, thank you so much, Lauren and Shivi. And it was really a pleasure working with you. I also just want to put in another personal plug that if anyone is interested in the Curriculum Alignment Hub, to reach out to Lauren, Shivi, or I, because yeah, we've really put a lot of effort into that and we'd like to see it grow. So next up, we have Ikitabu. And Ikitabu is an organization that has been committed to ensuring that all learners have access to high quality inclusive educational content. And they're specifically focused on improving access to children with disabilities, as well as content in different local languages. So in the next few minutes, they'll tell us about how they've been supporting teacher training for teachers of blind and low vision learners, and how they've increased access to content for deaf and hard of hearing learners. So over to the Ikitabu team. I believe Will is first up.
Thank you, Taskeen. Mine is just to say thank you, really. First, thank you to the EdTech Hub, Taskeen, Bjorn, Jamie, Molly, Abeba, Chris, especially over these last several weeks. And I know Tom's not here, but you guys have been great. We really appreciate your help, your support, and your advice. A few other thank yous for this work. I don't know what that's happened, but I just wanted to mention that in what you're going to see from my colleagues Ignatius and Georgine, there are a lot of people and organizations, some of whom are explicitly mentioned here. But thank you, first of all, to Kevin Carey of the World Braille Council. Thanks so much to Leonard Cheshire. Marie, I think, is on the call, for all your fantastic collaboration, your ideas, your patience, your seriousness. Ubongo, we love you guys and thank you. You'll see some of your work here. And also some people who probably won't get mentioned, but Royal Dutch Cantalis, Deaf Child Worldwide, and of course, Kenya Ministry of Education, Director to Special Needs Education, Director Haga in particular, and our friends and colleagues at Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. So I know our time is quite limited. If I've missed anyone, thank you for your help and your support too. Ferenc, over to you.
Thanks, Will. So hi, everyone. So for our presentation today, we'll be focusing on the two main activities that we worked with in our collaboration with EdTech Hub. So for the first activity, which my colleague Ignatius will be walking us through, we focused on training teachers of blind and low vision learners in Western Kenya. And then for our second activity, which my colleague Georgine will be taking us through, focused on increasing the access to educational content for deaf and hard of hearing learners during the COVID-19 school closures. And please, I know there's a Q&A at the end, but please, everyone feel free to include your questions in the chat and we'll be happy to answer them throughout. Over to you, Georgine.
Thank you, Ferenc.
Apologies, over to you, Ignatius. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Just kidding, Tina.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Will, Ferenc, and hi, everyone. So thank you. I'll use the time that I've been allocated. So you can see on my screen, as mentioned by my colleague, Ferenc, we did the training in Western Kenya, training teachers of blind and low vision learners. So in summary, this program was in response to COVID-19 closure, whereby we train teachers remotely. These teachers are teachers of blind and low vision learners, that is in Western Kenya region. through the use of low-cost assistive devices, and we also have brought in some e-braille materials. And then this program, we use it to actually pilot the UDL informed teacher professional development. That is actually in good collaboration with our friend Leona Cheshire, and I can see also Marie is on the call. And also part of this program, the main objective, as I've mentioned earlier in the summary, was to train teachers specifically in Braille, that is reading and writing, using the Orbit Reader 20 device, in which I will show you a picture of this particular device later on in the subsequent class. Basically, was also to actually train teachers while schools were closed, and then we were aiming to improve the learning outcomes for blind children when schools reopen. So at the moment, as we actually having this meeting, the teachers continue to engage with these learners. So part of the achievement which we can mention that we achieved into this program, we managed to train 10 teachers. So these teachers are now comfortable using the low-cost assistive devices, and also they are able to now read and write in Braille. But also to mention, we are still continuing to support these teachers, making sure that they are maintaining these concepts that were taught in this program. Part of the concept that were covered in the program, you can see, is the Braille alphabets, the English and the Kiswahili Braille. And then we also covered the numericals, that is numericals and punctuation marks. We also covered how to use the Orbit Reader 20 technology, and then how do you read a book using the Orbit Reader. And in this slide, you can see a photo of two teachers. One teacher who is on the far right actually is visually impaired. Then the other teacher is sighted. This is part of the training that when the teacher was being trained in how to engage using the Orbit Reader. And then below it, you can see this is the picture of the device itself. This is now the Orbit Reader technology. And then on the far right, this is just a screenshot of the WhatsApp platform that we have created. Part of the platform that we have created in regards to making sure that teachers are being supported by all means. So you can see this is just an instance where one teacher was asking for assistance in how to actually save an already existing exercise in the Orbit Reader, and then there was some response from her colleagues. On the next slide, you can see in terms of also to measure the impact for this program, as course instructors, actually we conducted an assessment with the trained teachers on reading and writing in Braille, and we covered three categories. That was the Braille alphabets, numericals, and the Orbit Reader. You can see some results which are pretty encouraging. 78% of the teachers scored A or B, and then 11% of the teachers scored grade A, and then 67% of the teachers scored grade B. You can also see a picture of a teacher in classroom with a visually impaired learner. And then in this slide, I will play for you a clip, a short clip of the same teacher engaging with the learner.
C, D, E, F.
So the teacher is teaching the learner the alphabets.
Okay, can you touch them now? You touch as you go. Read as you go.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Show me letter G. Letter F. Touch letter A. Touch letter A.
So that's a clip of the teacher now engaging with the learner as part of the evidence. And then
C, D,
on my next slide,
E,
second. Also, as part of the lessons, we learned various lessons, but just to pick up 5 key lessons that we learned into this program. The first one was actually this program was designed to set up teachers up for success in regards of now building their confidence, so they are able now to engage and teach the learners the concept that they have learned. We also learned that regular contacts keep the teachers motivated. In this program, we're having a weekly check-in, making sure that on the concept that we have covered in the previous week, in the following week, we'll be following up with the teachers, discussing in which areas or section that they are still stuck or they need support. And we were doing this weekly contacts individually. So we are calling each teacher individually, and then we are following up with them how they are progressing with the program. We also learned that teachers learn in different styles. We came to realize that some were learning or understanding the concepts much faster than the others. So in some instance, we had to redo or again repeat some of the tutorials that the teachers needed help. And then another lesson that we learned in terms of also using the assessment, you have to use it strategically, because one instance that we came to realize before we came to do the assessment, we had to communicate with the teachers that we are going to do an assessment within a certain time and period. So we came to realize that the teachers were kind of afraid in terms of assessment. So to make sure that the time for the assessment was used more effectively, so we had to call the teachers and actually explain to them the objective of the assessment, that we are here to help you where you are still need support. So it worked very effectively, I can say, because upon now doing the assessment individually, the teachers, they were open in areas that they needed support. And that now takes me now to the fifth lesson learned, in which regards says that the follow-up support is really needed and very key. So majority of the teachers say that they still need support to understand these concepts and also to retain them so that they can impart these skills to the teachers. So without further ado, I'll say thank you and then hand it over to my colleague Georgine to actually give us a summary on activity 2. Over to you, Georgine.
Quick interruption, Ignatius. You have 2 minutes left for the rest of the presentation. So maybe we can wrap up quickly and we can have more time to discuss it in the Q&A.
Okay.
So yes, I will try to summarize, and I'll be building on the accessibility materials that we did in activity 2, and to increase accessible education for deaf children and hard of hearing learners during their school closure, and collaborating with Ubongo Kids. The main objective was to increase accessible materials for early grade learners and to support literacy and socio-emotional learning as a response to COVID-19 and school closure. So we were doing that in the broadcast media. Next slide. So the impact of activity 2 is that we had extended digital story time in Kenya, and we developed 10 new episodes to broadcast on broadcast media. And so from this, we have 4 million viewership, and this was aired for free. The digital episode has each episode has about 2 to 3 sign language videos with an introduction, questions, and glossary, which support the children to acquire sign language as deaf children, and also vocabulary as they go on to a pathway to literacy. Next slide. So we were able to collaborate with Ubongo Kids to adapt one of the episodes in Kenyan Sign Language, which was broadcasted in 3 main TV stations in Kenya. I want to show you briefly a clip of what we did.
We're the champions. That's right. Pocataga Football Club. We're awesome. I'm stuffed.
Fruit! I'm selling fruit!
Thank you. Next slide.
We're the champions.
We were also able to produce 10 accessible EPUBs for Tanzania, Ghana, and they are available free online, and to publish a toolkit for prototype with Ghana and Tanzania, and also to add by adding Ghana Sign Language and also Tanzania Sign Language. Next slide, please. Next slide. Some of the key lessons that we learned when we were adapting in the adaptation process is that we need enough time for adaptation so that everything is aligned well. We also learned that we need to introduce sign language at pre-production stage so that at the end, it's not a complicated process. We also learned that, that households need a direct engagement so that we can continue to make sure that they're using the content. The other lesson is that on qualitative assessment is needed so that we can measure the impact of the utilization at home. Next slide, please. To add to the efforts of collecting evidence for the case study, we are observing the deaf children at home using the digital story time with their parents, and they believe that digital story time was supporting their child or their children and it's motivating them to read. And now we are looking for more stories in sign. They are looking for more stories in sign language. Next slide.
Thank you.
So I would say thank you, and I'll hand over back to the host.
Thank you so much for that excellent presentation. There was so much juicy bits and those videos were so great that I didn't want to rush you much. So we'll jump into the question and answer session now. Just a bit of housekeeping. If you'd like to ask a question, you can paste it into the chat or you can raise your hand. Let's try to do this in a lightning fire fashion. We have just under 15 minutes for Q&A. So I'll kick off with the first question. So if each of the grantees could perhaps tell us, reflecting on the other sessions, what similarities and differences you saw in your own experience. So for example, some of the challenges mentioned were doing real-time monitoring and evaluation, or funding, or working with governments, having to deliver fast. Maybe you could just spend a minute reflecting on what you learned from other presentations and how that resonated with yourself. I'll hand over to Rising, to George first.
Thank you. A lot I could say. I'll try and keep it brief. I thought the thing that stuck out to me from Lauren and Shivi's presentation about open source funding this was new for us, using a Creative Commons license and opening things up free. And while we're very proud of the kind of quality of the curriculum content we produced, the really exciting thing about Rising on Air is actually the innovation that was built on top of it by other people. And so by doing that, it kind of unleashed this kind of chain of interesting use cases in parts of the world we would never have imagined. And those innovations have led to us kind of completely changing how we feel about our content and all those things. And if you told me a year ago that I'd be talking about building a chatbot, I would have told you you're insane. But it's become from that open source nature of sharing and innovating and practicing. So that feels like an extremely important part of this process, and we really appreciate all the funding we received to help that happen. And I hope it's something that can continue for us and for other organizations doing this sort of work.
Great. Lauren or Shivi?
Sure, thank you. And Thanks, George. I think that's really exciting for us, definitely, to hear that others are seeing the potential of the open source and Creative Commons licensing. So we definitely hope to be able to support organizations like yours who are now seeing the need to adapt their materials, especially in terms of localizing them and aligning them to curriculum in a lot of different countries. With regard to that, I think one thing that was very true for a lot of us across the grantees is the benefit that we got from being involved with the EdTech Hub, in the sense of being able to be connected to where exactly the real pain points are in preparing content for these types of very, very rapid iterative development cycles. The experience that the EdTech Hub had in specifically diagnosing where the problems were in terms of repositories or understanding virtual learning environments, or being very far along with a certain virtual learning environment and needing to know how a different platform, a different set of content might integrate into what's already going on. We benefited a lot from that, absolutely. And that enabled us to also feel more confident going forward in this process, where the sort of M&E that would normally be possible wasn't really, in terms of with COVID, the amount of time that you can take with beneficiaries and the amount of time that you want to spend on doing those types of evaluation is also lessened. So being involved with a partner who did really understand those things and the different governmental contexts was really key for us. And Lauren, maybe you can speak more to that.
Yeah, I think there's also just an underlying subtext throughout all of our presentations around what adoption actually looks like, particularly at the government level, and some of the challenges with that. So kind of like who your initial partners are, to be able to test materials and to test a product and to see like how it best meets needs, and to kind of grow from there, and then scaling it up to government adoption and kind of some of the inherent challenges in that. So some of the takeaways from that process is what directly fed into the concept note that we developed. And so it'd be really interesting to also get the perspectives of the other grantees around of how we framed that, particularly from a buy-in perspective in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Lauren and Shivi, and Ikitabu, for your reflections.
Sure, thanks, Teskeen. Teskeen, I know we're real quick here. Yeah, Ferenc, thank you. Can you just do that? Great, put it in presentation. So to the EdTech Hub colleagues, this chart will be familiar. And perhaps to other people on the call, but this is a tool. This spiral is something that has helped us enormously to think about building evidence on a pathway to scale. So if Chris McBurney and other EdTech Hub folks haven't introduced you to this, then we can recommend it highly. You're beginning in the center, and for us, one of the major advantages of working in this model with the EdTech Hub was to walk this path of building evidence from a place where your theory of change is fluid, from a place where you're groping for what qualitative evidence or what quantitative evidence makes sense even to go after. And Bjorn and Teskeen and Chris and others, I mean, Tom too, you guys have been enormously helpful. What we've done with your chart is, I guess this is activity 1. So this is the one Ignatius led. Ignatius and Ferenc located this star on that chart. If we had animated this slide, then that star would have moved along this path, this spiral path, from probably the top right quadrant down over this period that we've been working with you guys into this lower left quadrant. So I'll leave it at that, but I just, for us, it's very clear that evidence is the pathway to scale for anything that we're doing, and scale in the most important dimension, which is impact. So thank you for that. And I hope, if I don't know if you guys are using this tool with other people, but Chris, can I ask you to comment whether is everybody thinking about these things the same way, or how do you see it?
So, well, there's quite a few questions, so I'm gonna pass on to a few more questions because we've only got 10 minutes. I was wondering if we could tackle the question from Suzanne, and I'll pass this on to learning equality in terms of just wanting to hear more about your experience as a thought partner with the Hub. Lauren or Chevy, did you hear that?
Oh, sorry. Us as a thought. I mean, it was just like I know I touched upon it a bit in the presentation, but like Taskin and I had weekly calls where we were able to not just focus on the kind of 5 areas of our project, but also to share back things that we were also hearing in the space as COVID was evolving, and where we could draw connections and be most impactful. There was a lot of other work, obviously, that we were both doing outside of this collaboration, where those were really helpful touch points. And then because we also hosted these 2 brown bag style sessions with some of the expert pool, we were able to touch upon a lot of different aspects of our work. And we've had some really thoughtful conversations, particularly with Tom and Caspar, specific around what resources government needs for adoption of a VLE, but also open source technology, particularly given the fact that inherently there's no actual cost of the software, but there's obviously a lot of other downstream costs and human resources and capacity. So that has been incredibly valuable for us just in terms of thinking about our organizational growth. But I think it's especially exciting for us to be aligned on areas around curriculum alignment because there's been so much demand, and before COVID, but particularly during COVID, around openly available sets of aligned materials.
Thanks so much, Lauren. So the next question I'll take from Nisha. So it's great to see how many partners used and built upon distributed your resources and platforms. I'm curious to know how many of these were government partners versus non-profits in the private sector. I think I'll pass this one to George, given your work with the Sierra Leone government.
Yeah, we work directly with the Sierra Leone government and the Liberian government. So we formed only part of their national response. But that was a very sort of direct relationship between us and the government. But the materials were also taken up by the governments of Guinea, Chad, and Gambia as well. So we saw good take up. And in those cases, we actually had a very hands-off approach. They had heard about what we were doing. They approached us. We offered to support in any way they needed. But actually, in most cases, they were able to take it and run with it and work with their local partners. So it's the key for us. It's the way we keep wanting to extend our work. But we had really positive experiences so far with working with government.
Thanks, George. And next, a question from Nafisa. And apologies, I don't see any hands up. That's why I'm reading off the questions. But Nafisa says, could you tell us more about the tools used to assess literacy or SEL learning progress? And this is to Ikitabu. So is there anything you would have done differently, knowing what you know in terms of generating evidence?
Sure, okay.
Maybe.
Yeah, Gina, you want to take it, please?
Oh, all right, thanks, Will. So the sign language assessment tool that we're using now has been adapted together with Kentalis for sign language acquisition. And the assessment tool itself is to check the process of the learner and acquisition of sign language as an intervention needed to reach a certain level of sign language acquisition. This assessment tool does not work well with parents. We have tried to simplify and adapt an assessment tool which is easy to work with the parents and at home.
Great, thanks, Susan. I think this will be our last question. So from Sophia, and maybe this can be a quick answer, just 1 or 2 sentences from each of you. Did any of these programs include tools or strategies to support teachers' well-being in general and in particular during COVID-19? So teachers' well-being. George, over to you. Quick answer, please.
Yes, it did. We built teacher professional development radio series when we realized the need, how great the need was. We also developed a program for teachers to use phone tutorials with students. So we've generated scripts and have done guidance on how teachers can use that, because we found that to be a very effective solution of keeping teachers engaged and making sure children were being supported.
Lauren, Shivi?
Yeah, Shivi, do you want to share a little bit more about our SEL work that wasn't directly related, but has implications?
Sure. So concurrently with this project, we were also working on a scoping of open source materials dealing with social emotional learning. These are materials that are very hard to find for students who are disconnected from the internet in a lot of different cases. But we saw some really interesting types of teacher support programs. One of the big ones was generalized lesson planning support, which enables you to put different types of content into a structure dealing with pedagogies. So it will focus on something in particular like reflective learning or inquiry-based learning or something like that. And that means that different content, which is produced for different curricula with different learning objectives, can be more easily incorporated by the teacher. We're also seeing a lot of trends towards different work in student self-directed learning, which is another thing that can really take a burden off a very overtaxed teacher in a classroom by enabling the students to communicate their work more readily to teachers, to communicate their level of understanding and things that they need. So guides around that have also been a trend which we found to be pretty promising, but we're really interested in hearing more about the materials that others are producing so we can also integrate these into Colibri if we can.
Thank you so much, Ivy. And back to Ikitabu, quick 30 seconds on teachers' well-being. Okay, if there's no response, okay, great. Then I'll pass over to Molly.
Sorry. Yeah, I think I was also chatting with Will, and like I was kind of lost in the chat. So kindly, if you could repeat the question.
Great. We're just looking at how your tools or products could support teachers' well-being, especially in COVID-19. Any social-emotional support to teachers?
Yes, I think
just a quick answer. Fine. Thanks.
I would say yes, because we have a WhatsApp platform that we are now engaging the teachers as they continue now to understand this concept. Because if you look at the Orbit Reader technology, this program actually ran for 6 months, but now to be able to effectively use this device or understand it so that you can now be able to teach a learner, still the teacher needs support. So we are continuing to support the teachers as they continue to understand these concepts.
Thank you so much, Ignatius. So I'll pass over to Molly now to give the wrap up and concluding remarks.
Thanks, Taskeen, and thank you so much to everyone who presented today and for the amazing work over the past year and months of working together. I just wanted to end with a kind of quick reflection on what I think is one of the really interesting threads that ran through what we heard from Learning Equality, eKitabu, and Rising. And that has to do with, despite the amazing success we saw with Reach, 12 million kids in 200 days, 4 million kids, partnerships with governments across the continent, what is still incredibly difficult is assessing whether it's working, right? And so we can look at things like uptake, we can look at things like satisfaction, but measuring learning, measuring teacher growth, measuring parent engagement is difficult. And that's why the EdTech Hub is here, right? We realize that it's complex, that it's difficult, that as Ignatius said, we don't want to just assess kids or teachers constantly. We want to do it strategically. We want to know what we're measuring for. And so I just want to kind of leave us all with that challenge as we go forward. I'll quote Will, who said, "Evidence is the pathway to scale," and that is absolutely what we believe at the EdTech Hub, that we are building the evidence base together, and these grants have been a huge contribution to that evidence base and what it takes from a systemic level, not just one intervention at a time, but partnerships with government, political economy, learning languages, and getting kids at the right moment in the right place and at the right level. And so there's a lot more for us all to learn on the journey of both implementation and evaluation and research, but this has been a pretty fantastic start. So thank you so much to all of the grantees, to Taskeen and Ababa and Chris, who did an amazing job managing this work over the last many months, and let's keep the conversation going. So thanks to everyone and have a wonderful day.